Hi, I'm Gudrun Bergman, also known as Rona Bergman, and I live in Iceland. And I have a wonderful guest today, someone that I have been working with here in Iceland as a tour leader for his groups, Jean Ang. And I'm going to leave the introduction to you, Jean, but I so appreciate the fact that you have one of my favorite waterfalls on the screen behind you, which is Goðafoss.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks, Runa. It's been great to work with you and to just be in Iceland this past month, and then also last year in 2023. We had even a bigger group then, but it was very powerful, both of the trips. And a little bit about my background or work. So I do mostly energy healing, and created a methodology just to bring through some of the things that I learned called the Arcturian healing method, more like a star-based or cosmic energy method, just to help shift people and the planet, kind of coincide with the raising of the frequency, and different sacred site trips like what we did and what we'll talk about is sort of a counterpart to that, maybe just working with people individually with the energies, and then also helping to train other people who are interested or want to find an outlet to help others with that energy. And so that's called the Arcturian healing method.
So
And
how
then
did you
just
get introduced to that?
Oh yeah, it was interesting. It was very intuitive. Like I was just gonna say, like kind of the prior background to the energy work was I was trained in neuroscience, or received a PhD in neurobiology, and then prior to that, did my Bachelor of Science in human biology and philosophy and religious studies. But just to answer your question, so it was very like an academic sort of life prior to the healing work, which
Yeah.
is what I'm currently doing now. But yeah, it was interesting how that came about. Like when I was starting to uh, learn some of the energy modalities in the beginning, sort of that healing journey, I just received an intuitive voice that said I was Arcturian. I didn't even really know where that word came from. So it was a little bit of like 5 years of unpacking just what that meant before I even like did something public with those energies.
Wonderful. Well, I've received healing from you twice, and the energy transmissions are so powerful from you that it's just absolutely incredible. So I understand why you can transmit these energies through your podcast because they're almost, you can almost touch them.
Mm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that is pretty, yeah, very powerful and very transformative.
Well, that's great. Yeah. I think we're in a kind of a new age of energy work, spiritual work. Of course, we're building on kind of the shoulders of giants, so to speak. But I kind of liken it to how our technology and the physical world is developing. We went from maybe not even having communication technology, for example, and then it was more like Morse code with wires, telephone with wires. Then we went wireless, at some point,
Yeah,
or in between we had like those box phones. I don't know if you had,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. But so same with energy healing, or with healing, maybe we had to be in person, and then we had to use maybe certain instruments to demonstrate that so that the person believed something was happening to them. And just to jump, to where we are now, like you said, now we can have like on the internet something recorded, and people can tune into the cloud, of the healing pattern, and then you don't even necessarily have to have the healer there or the person there simultaneously. They could tune in, through a recording, or even for some people, they don't even need any physical sort of device. They just could tap in with their consciousness to this healing energy pattern that might be in the astral, let's say astral dimension.
Yeah, it's really interesting, as you say, because there's been so much change in such a short period of time. But do you think that's connected to what we call the quantum field of unlimited possibilities? Isn't that the energy we're bringing in?
Yeah, I think the quantum model helped to make these patterns accessible for the modern person. Of course, maybe they're probably already in work even in Lemurian, Atlantean, Egyptian times, these kind of consciousness technologies. But the modern person, is very maybe linear, concrete, which was very helpful for developing our technology. So then the quantum model that you just mentioned, I think really helped people realize that we're interconnected. This idea of entanglement, that we could be connected, or how like electrons are connected without any kind of physical connection or bridge,
Yeah.
then allow us to maybe apply that to ourselves.
But I don't think, we worked together twice here in Iceland, but I don't think I ever asked you what kind of sparked your interest in Iceland, and why did you choose Iceland to visit?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was kind of tuning into that, how that emerged. Usually, one trip will lead to the next trip. So our first trip, just to identify that on linear time, was in 2023. And so in 2022, went to Peru with a fairly big group. We worked with Jorge Luis Delgado. Maybe you know of him. He identified that gateway, the Amaru Meru gateway. So without consciously thinking about it, it must have emerged out of that trip. Something, because I usually think, okay, where is the opening next? Where is the interest next, or where kind of the guides are, opening that up. And so I think that Iceland just came into consciousness, and I think that it was my sense is that the codes in Iceland are, and I kind of feel maybe it's associated with the increase in just overall tourism in Iceland. Maybe some
Possibly.
people going there unconsciously
Yeah.
to receive the codes, and then the spiritual, maybe people are going there consciously.
Yeah.
Is all, but we're all kind of increased interest. So I think that was in the morphic field, and I think that's what birthed the first trip to
Yeah,
Iceland.
yeah, yeah. Because it was interesting. Is that your travel agent, she approached a travel agent here in Iceland
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
didn't know how to organize a tour like this for you.
Exactly.
And so they got in touch with me and said that, there's a man who wants to bring a group, for spiritual purposes to Iceland. And can you create a tour for him? And I said, yes, I can. And so that's how it all started. And the interesting part is that you go to other countries, you go to the UK for Stonehenge, you go to the Isle of Lewis for the Callinistic stones, you go to Egypt for the pyramids, you go to Peru for the, old temples or Machu Picchu or the jungle or something. But here in Iceland, basically the PowerPoints and the energy is surrounded or is around glaciers. And so the sacred sites are in nature or mountains where there used to be ceremonies held in the past by the people who first settled here. And then, of course, the magical experience that we had in the center of the island this summer when we were by Hofsjökull, which is kind of like a circle if you look at the map. And so I think that's because people say, where are you going to? Where are you taking them to? And I name mountains and you could say mountains and canyons and hills or valleys or something. And people go like, yeah, but what is there? And there is the nature, there's the energy, there's the presence of the old sacred ceremonies. And then, of course, the beings that guard or protect that area. So I was thrilled that you decided to come once and then that you decided to come again, because I think what we did on the most recent trip now in June was very, very important for the country as such.
Yeah, yeah. I just will circle back a little bit to what you said about the first trip and then come back here. But I do remember now, I was working with Helen Tomei, like you said, the tour. operator who I worked with who planned the Peru trip. And so she knew I wanted to go to Iceland. And at that point, we didn't know each other. We didn't know, and it was in the
True.
pre-birth.
Yes.
Pre-birth. But I remember we interviewed like two or three people, two or three to try to get someone who kind of was resonating not just with a tour, but with a spiritual tour.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and then I think she finally found the Terra Nova, and
Uh-huh.
then we were like, oh, I think we know someone. We know
Okay.
someone who will fit, and then it was a
So
great.
that's the coincidences of the.
Yeah, it's a great find. Everyone on that tour said you're a gift, a pure treasure. So, so I get that really worked out, and so that we needed some time before the conception of the trip, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
before
It
it
took
got
some
birth.
time. Yeah,
Yeah,
which is
but
wonderful.
yeah, it was very helpful to do that evaluation and that planning. I think maybe 3 months, in the summer before we were able to contact you in Terra Nova. But
Yeah,
back to your question here, yeah. So as things unfolded, yeah, I think that was really powerful. The second trip, it's just like, it's probably more at hand, so it probably feels even more powerful. But we definitely you set the, really that itinerary to visit these sacred sites and empower these ley lines. I think that was a new complement to the first trip, which I feel like they're two complementary wholes, the
yeah,
two trips in some ways. But I think that was that conscious intent to activate the sites made that really special.
absolutely, absolutely. And I feel there's been a shift in the energy in the country, and of course, we're all going through such a big shift these days
Mhm.
now that is like,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're kind of we're stepping into something so new. And the feeling is like you're on the threshold or even on the precipice of a canyon or something, and you know you have to step off, but you're not quite sure what's going to happen. And at the same time, it's kind of the conflicting thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember you said that we would all be different after the second tour, and I think that was the case. And for myself, and I think for others who I've been able to recontact since then. I've seen some people on the tour, post tour at some events in
Yeah.
person. I will see some more people this coming weekend in
Mhm.
Boston. But yeah, it was very transformative personally. But like you said, I think we had that intention to do it, at least for the land, like for the land in Iceland, but also globally as we connected to the ley lines, that emanated from Iceland and connected into Iceland. But I think, like, yeah, what you're saying about the precipice, because a lot of people who I think are aware, doing things spiritually for maybe many years, like yourself, when now sort of this idea of the technology and spirituality evolving.
Yeah.
So before, like, we would need to see something in the manifest world to
Yes.
act. And sometimes that's too slow in the spiritual world because by the time it's hit physical dimension, the pattern in the spiritual world is already one, already forward.
Yeah.
So now you have to preempt, like what you're saying is, I think now a lot of people called to do their spiritual work and interconnect as a group. They have to do things before it hits this physical world because it requires that kind of that's how fast we're moving. So we have to kind of trust that spiritual message, maybe from our guides or seeing the pattern clairvoyantly before it's hit the physical, and then act, and then the physical catches up and maybe affirms, our intuition. So
Mhm.
that's a big step, I think, in the type of work,
Yeah.
which is kind of that jumping off the
Yeah, off the
precipice.
cliff. Yeah, yeah. It's like there is a place in Iceland where most of our water is cold. Of course, in the rivers and such. But there's one campground where there's a kind of a little hill, and the children, if the weather's good and the water's kind of lukewarm, they can jump in. So
Oh
it's
wow.
like, yay, so much fun. But for us who are more fixed, because children aren't as fixed as we as adults are, it's kind of like, how do I the feeling of kind of interfere, but yet knowing that we have to step off the ledge. And it was interesting that, because you remember those cards that we had on the tour, the Assyrian Enlightenment codes. So I pulled one yesterday.
Oh, great.
And it said closure.
Oh, nice.
About how all the things we've done and been and such up to now, like everything that is not supporting our spiritual purpose must be left behind now. So it's like, you have to go through your stuff, you have to go through all the emotions and all the issues you haven't dealt with emotionally, so that you can basically clear the air and maybe kind of draw a line and move into the new. And even when you're sorting that out, and it has to do about like, what do we call it when you play the martyr,
like a martyrdom.
Yeah, and it's like, poor me,
For me.
Yeah, all these, because we have to step into our soul self, we have to be, and I liken this with, because I've been working a lot with health and health issues, and I like to say the body is our house, basically, our temple or our palace, if you want to say, and we need to step up and be in charge there. Like not follow what everyone else says we're supposed to do. So I think that, be the biggest version of who we are, basically.
I like that.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of that happened during our tour, because gradually people, for example, trusted their intuition and trusted the messages they were getting. And that's a lot of a big issue is trusting, because we're all getting messages, intuitive information, and many people don't trust it. So I think that's one of the parts that I'm excited about. And the interesting thing is also, because I as we could say normal tour leader, I've taken groups from Iceland to Peru.
Oh, okay.
On 6 occasions. And what I did after the first, I think 3, I always asked a shaman to come and perform a ceremony while in the Sacred Valley. There was kind of like this half day of adjusting to the altitude and things like that. And so I would ask the local guide to find a shaman who'd be willing to come and do ceremony for us.
Oh, wow.
And we'd sit there on the grass or the ground and go through a ceremony. So because part of it was I wanted to show people the way in which people, the indigenous people practice their spirituality. We're not talking about the people who go to the Catholic Church in the cities, but the ones who worship the nature, the mountains, the earth and everything. And these elements are so important, because we need to reconnect with earth. Because we kind of just trampled on it.
Right, exactly.
And not been connected to it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's what we did on the tour here in Iceland, getting very much in touch with the nature.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
I think that bringing through what you're saying, like the authentic self, the most powerful or highest level of oneself. Yeah, that was definitely a big theme and process. I think that these different codes and energies that we are visiting around the island did for people personally or individually.
Yeah. Do you have a place that kind of stands out in your memory as the most important one, or?
Well, yes, they were all memorable, but the place we went to activate in the west, maybe you can remind me of the exact name. No, on the east,
Yeah, the dragon.
the
Yeah,
dragon.
yeah,
And we went to the site. We were your friend also, the shaman or guide, took us to that site that I think a group had worked with previously
yeah.
the year before. I really found that ceremony we did there to be very profound. Uh, for whatever reason, maybe there was also the previous group's activation energy there, and in combination with the dragon, which we were talking about earlier, just as one of the archetypal guardians in general that have really been coming to people's consciousness.
Yeah,
So that's a very powerful ceremony, I think, and that land energy there.
it was. Yeah, very
Mm.
memorable. Yeah, I agree with you. That and the experience we had at the Arctic Henge.
Oh yeah, that was also in the north.
Yeah,
That was also a very powerful ceremony, and like you said, people really opened up their clairvoyant eye. I think the things they shared, like without you having told the full story yet to people, they really tuned in to the elements of that were then confirmed by you, like
yeah,
you know, birth
yeah,
and what was going on there.
yeah. It was interesting that they tuned into the artist and his story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was the
Yes.
most memorable thing. And when we, maybe I should explain that we're talking about the guardians of the island, but
Mm-hmm.
it goes back, way back to the time when people had just settled in Iceland, and one of the kings of Norway, he was planning to invade the island to conquer it.
Mm-hmm.
Norway got to rule it about 400 years later, but that's another story. But in order to check how secure, how well guarded the island was, he called upon a Sami shaman from the northern part of Norway, and he asked him to go to Iceland to find out, how heavily guarded is the island.
Mm.
And the shaman, he shapeshifted into a seal,
Mm.
and he came up to the east coast, and he swam up along the coast until he came to a fjord where there were dragons coming out, and all kinds of kind of bird-like things that they were guarding the east. And then he went around the north, and that's where he saw this mighty eagle come guarding the north. And then he went around to the west, and that's where the bull came like full force out of the fjord. And that's
Mm.
also interesting because the bull came out of the fjord. That's always been considered the place of plenty, because there were so many, because of the fish in the ocean, the seals, the birds and everything. It was considered like the food chest of the country.
Mm.
And then the giant in the south. And I was just reminded, because we kind of went the wrong way around. We didn't go clockwise, we went anti-clockwise. And it
Mm.
wasn't until I was at Godafoss a few days ago. We were celebrating the dragons in nature. And
Mm.
then I realized when I listened to the story that we'd gone exactly anti-clockwise too.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and the interesting part is also that because the first people who settled in Iceland were pagan, is that these guardian symbols, they're on our currency, on our coins,
Oh, wow.
also
Wow.
on our kind of shield of armor for the entire country. So
Mm.
the president, his flag has this. Maybe you call it coat of arms or something,
Mm.
but
Code of.
it has the dragon, the bull, the eagle, and the giant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's the old spirit still follows,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is quite
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It reminds me there's a book actually about the current American currency and the symbolism of the American currency, and it was written by a Mason. And so what ends up on currency usually has, like you're pointing out here in Iceland too, deep spiritual or esoteric significance. And then it gets reinforced because the entire population subconsciously is energizing it
Yeah.
with their thoughts and holding money and so forth. So,
but the energy has kind of the reactivation was, well, the message that I received was that the reactivation was so important because we have stopped using currency so much. We just use credit cards or our phone to pay with. So the consciousness is not there anymore. We're not thinking about what is this? And, we even, we receive monetary notes and we know it's a 10 or a 5 or a 20 or a 50, but we don't notice what's on it. Like, I don't think people do in any country consciously remember exactly what picture and who's on this, whose picture's on that note or so. So I think it's kind of an interesting part because when you don't, how should I put it? When you don't pay attention to something, it loses energy.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you need to keep that energy going. So anyway, I so appreciate that you brought people to Iceland on a spiritual tour because I thought that was so important. And, I was grateful for all the work that we did together. So where is your next tour going to take you?
I usually try to maybe do 2 tours a year. So this was the first big one, and then the second big one, which I did feel there were small signs of a connection. And while we were in Iceland this year, is to Mount Kailash in Tibet, where we also will be doing like you in that tradition, you circle.
Yeah.
Like you don't climb it per se.
No.
I'm sure you can allow it to climb it. But you do circle it. And so there's this similarity in the circumambulation of a sacred site that we had done in Iceland this time. And it was interesting when we were when I first arrived in Reykjavik, when you were taking me around, I think we were about to talk about this next tour in, Mount Kailash. And then, believe it or not, I looked over to the side and there's a store, a Chilean store called Kailash.
Yes. Yes.
I was like, oh gosh, this must be a shamanic synchronistic sign. It could be random, but places in Iceland they have a store called Kailash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting how things travel around, the world. Yeah. Yeah, I would have loved to come with you to Tibet, except my lungs don't do so well at an altitude that you're going to. And I don't train the way you do. So, you do all these special breathing techniques.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
For trips to high altitudes. For me, going up to Lake Titicaca, and I did go to Chaco Canyon on one of the tours, which is kind of 4,500 meters, I believe. Yeah. So that's kind of the top that I'll go to. But you're going to something way higher, aren't you?
I think the highest is around 19,000 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's around the 12, 11,000 to 15,000 probably on average.
Okay. Yeah.
Feet.
Yeah. Still, yeah. But then you have Egypt.
Maybe that was also related. I know we were making the ley line connections in Iceland, and that was just being kind of birthed while we were in Iceland or announced. So next year, like I know you had gone to Egypt many times, and I went twice before in 2019. So a lot of people, that was like kind of a request, actually all through COVID. People were asking to go back to Egypt. And I'm sure people, of course, went. But then it was kind of, I finally got the opportunity or opening to plan that trip.
And when will that be? Do you have dates yet?
That'll be in October of 2025.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I thought, there were a lot of, again, similarities. We saw a lot of the pyramid connections in Iceland to there. So kind of revisiting now with this experience and codes, I think, of our tour in Iceland and being in the land energies, I think will make Egypt, really a different experience also.
Yeah.
So I think we're all related. All the sites, maybe we're all going there as you kind of know, and to reactivate and share codes from one place to another, and create the resonant connection through the human bridge,
Yeah.
like from people visiting the same sites.
Yeah. Yes, it's just like back in 94 when I was in Mount Shasta, we made this rainbow bridge between that and Snæfell's Glacier.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So there were, I think, and then of course, in Adam Rutherford's book, he talks about the ley line that runs from the Giza pyramids to Hofsjökull in the center of Iceland, plus two other points in the country. So I think we're all interconnected in a way that we're unaware of, or maybe we're becoming aware of it and understanding more. And actually, he talked about the line being the most active in February and November. And he wrote the book. I think it was published in 1939. So he'd been working, between the World War I and II in excavations in Egypt, and found this line that directly pointed to Iceland. And he called the book in English "The Great Inheritance of Iceland."
Right.
Yeah, if I remember. And he was focusing on the fact that we'd been so isolated for so long. That there was this purity of the language and the nation as such. He didn't count in the French fishermen who were shipwrecked color to the population, but still, and because Iceland has always had this rich literature heritage and poetry. So it's been so, and so things were remembered through poetry, because there'd always be someone in each home way back in the time of settlement that would be the one who was the storyteller.
Wow.
And would tell the stories and recite the poetry. That's why many of the books that were written in the 12th and 13th century were, way after we became Christian as a country, were based on poetry and storytelling. It was the oral tradition. So we turned that into books. So we don't say, we say we don't have all the majestic buildings of mainland Europe, but we have majestic mountains and we have books.
Yeah, kind of that raw power. Yes, raw and refined simultaneously.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting, because we're talking about this, that Goðafoss is in your background. Is that further up that river is another waterfall. And I saw an image of it the other day, and there was definitely a dragon guarding the waterfall. So they seem to be appearing more and more in the land and in the ley line energies.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, as people pay attention, things come alive or stay alive. And I think there are a lot more people who are, like you said, very tuned into the dragon and the dragon energy in general. And of course, we're in the dragon year in the lunar new calendar. I think beings respond just like we would respond if someone was interested in us. Maybe we show up more.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So I think this is, so wonderful. So one thing that, really stands out of all the things you've done in the 2 years, would that still be the dragon?
Yeah, well, I also, like you said, Hofsjökull, the center was, I mean, there were so many powerful events. I mentioned the one in the East, but I think visiting the interior of Iceland, I don't know how common that is that people will do that on their visit. I know maybe like we were talking, you were sharing with me the ring road, of course, is a much more popular and accessible route for people maybe first visiting. But I would suggest, just from our experience, if anyone gets a chance to go into the interior and visit that location and that hotel, I think it was called the Highland, that was just open.
The Highland Hotel,
yeah, it was a very good site to move out from. Yeah, to go to the center of Iceland is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The glacier is the crown chakra.
Yeah. I think the energy there is exquisite and pristine and then more rare to make that trip there. Usually it is to make a trip into the center of an island. We did something similar on Kauai. There's a very powerful sacred site in the center of Kauai. Like most people are, around the perimeter. It's easier to live. But it's called Waialiali. It's like it's like a big not exactly a waterfall, but it's like the wettest place on the planet, one of them. Really? People go there to collect the water there. It comes down on a wall. And so you have to hike in. It's very and there's waterfalls and it's very beautiful, a little difficult to get to. You have to be in that hiking mode. But when I had visited Kauai, the person who organized that said, "Is there anywhere you want to visit?" And I just kind of let my intuition guide me. And I was like, "What's in the center?" And so I think there's just with sake of geometry, the center is always very important of a circle. So I think visiting Iceland's center was very rare opportunity. So I wanted to thank you, and not of course for everything, but for that opportunity. I thought that was very special.
Yeah, it was. We were lucky. The roads had already been opened, because it's not so easily accessible on cars until about the middle of June, and we were there at summer solstice, which was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah. Maybe I'll see you in the future in Iceland again. Who knows?
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. And I've checked out the Lemurian site, which is waiting for us to explore it further. And and there are, still 100 places to visit if you go down to the kind of details.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we should design our third trip.
Yeah, we will do that. The other thing is for people to approach you, you'll send me a link to your podcast.
Oh yeah, I think that's the most
where people can sign up for your newsletter and such.
Oh sure, yeah, that maybe the website, but podcast is nice because there's a lot of different transmissions there.
Yeah, but also you have a newsletter, so people may want to sign up to that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can send the link for that if people are interested in that.
Okay, and I'll send you the link when this comes out.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Yeah, maybe I'll post it on the podcast if that's good.
Yeah. So I'll just say I'll see you in the future.
I'll see you in the future.
Yeah. Thanks for the talk today.
Thanks, Runa. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. So I'm going to stop